Thank you for checking out Real Talk Personal Finance. Shit's about to get real. Cash Flow King with you today. And today in episode 21, Social Security Retirement Benefits Basics. Say that 5 times fast. Thanks for checking out the show. Thanks for being here. We certainly appreciate it. We love all and appreciate all of our listeners. Quick shout out to the folks out in Glenside, Pennsylvania, coming up on the charts here in the U.S. Obviously, the U.S., this is a U.S.-based show, is our number 1 listening country. Coming in at number 2, we got South Africa, and number 3 right now is the United Kingdom. So thank you very much to everybody listening to the show. Before we get into today's show about Social Security retirement benefits, just a quick couple of things I want to get out of the way. First, this is pretty much going to be the Cliff Notes version of Social Security retirement benefits, okay? As the name of the show specifically says, it's the basics. I don't think so at this point that we'll be doing an advanced show, although we might do some Q&A. We'll talk about that at the end. But this is meant to be just a basics show for those who pretty much don't know shit about Social Security retirement benefits and you want to, or even if you're very well versed, you just want a quick refresher, this is going to be the show for you. So again, we're going to cover the highlights and the basics of the Social Security Retirement Benefit Program. This episode is not an episode on strategy, and I want to make that clear. We did have a listener reach out to the show and said that they really enjoyed the annuity shows. However, they were hoping for a little bit more strategy. And I can certainly understand that, but I had to remind them, and I'll get our disclaimer out of the way here, that we do not give any advice or guidance on the show. We do this for entertainment and education purposes only. We give ideas and information. We don't give advice. And so while we will from time to time, like we kind of sort of alluded to on the last episode with the 4% rule, get into some potential strategies, there's no way for us to possibly get into individualized recommendations, individualized strategies. This is what you should or shouldn't always do or not do. We don't have the ability in this type of a format, a one-to-many type of format, to be able to do that. So where appropriate, we may give you some ideas. However, you always want to consult with your own financial professional and your own team of advisors around you for any specific strategies as they may apply to you. So again, the show is for entertainment and education purposes only. It's made and designed to give you some information, some good information, some ideas, some things to ask your team of advisors about, some things to look out for as you're working with your team of advisors, but it is certainly not meant to replace having one. And I do realize that many of the folks listening to the show may be part of the do-it-yourself crowd. That's totally fine. But again, I do think some of these areas and Social Security retirement benefits and planning on the optimal ways to collect such benefits may be one of those items where you may want to consult a professional to help you with that and pay for professional services. So I want to get that out of the way. This is not an episode on strategy. It is an episode on the basics. Always consult with your own professionals. Okay. With that said, let's go ahead and jump in, and we're going to go through some really basic stuff, and there's some things that we'll briefly mention. We will not elaborate on, at least in this episode, and if anybody wants more information, again, consult your own professional, or you can write into the show, and if we have some time, we might do a Q&A show and answer some general questions for people. So the first thing is, what is Social Security, right? You hear that all the time. Social Security. Well, what are people talking about? Well, Social Security is a federal insurance program that provides income every year to retired and disabled individuals, which is funded through payroll taxes. In today's episode, we are going to focus on retirement benefits for this episode. And there's a couple of other very closely related items that we'll talk about. We're not going to focus on disability benefits. We are going to focus on Social Security retirement benefits for today's episode. So, payroll taxes, what the fuck does that mean? Well, if you're an employee, let's say you're a W-2, for example, you might see something on your pay stub that says OASDI, for Old Age Survivors and Disability Act. Some people just refer to sort of this line item collectively as FICA tax. And what we're talking about is, when we talk about FICA, you're basically looking as the employee portion at 7.65% of your earnings, generally almost all of them. There's a couple of exceptions. If you remember way, way back to the first episode on health savings accounts or HSAs, those, if you're contributing to those and funding those through your job, if you're an employee, you're actually not having to pay FICA tax on those contributions. Separate topic. If you're interested, check out show number 1 on health savings accounts. But for the majority of your earnings, they are going to be subject to FICA tax, which is a total for the employee portion of 7.65%. And of that 7.65%, 6.2 of it goes towards Social Security and 1.45% of it goes towards Medicare. All right. And the Social Security portion, that 6.2%, is up to what's called the taxable wage base. And that number adjusts for inflation every year. Currently, that number is $147,000 in the year 2022. So if you earn $147,000 or below, then you will pay that 6.2% on all of those earnings, which goes towards Social Security. If you earn above $147,000, you will pay that 6.2% up to the 147, and any earnings that you earn above and beyond the 147 are not subject to that 6.2%. However, they are subject to the 1.45% for Medicare. There's currently no cap on that. We're not going to talk about Medicare today. We're going to try to keep the show relatively short. So we're just going to focus on Social Security retirement benefits. But that's how this program is funded, right? And you hear all kinds of reports and things where, okay, Social Security is going to run out, the trust fund is going to run out, so on and so forth. And I don't have it in front of me, but there was a trustee report that came out not too long ago where the vast majority, I forget the exact number, but historically it's been somewhere in the neighborhood of about 75%, maybe a little bit more than that now, of benefits that are payable will continue to be funded by these ongoing FICA payroll taxes, even if the trust fund goes to zero. So you hear people all the time talking shit about, hey, well, Social Security is not going to be there by the time I retire. Well, it probably is in some capacity, and we could do a whole show on modifications that are likely to be made in order to keep the program solvent. But let's just suffice it to say, for the purposes of today's abbreviated show, if shit hits the fan and the trust fund goes to zero and no changes are made, it's still going to pay out at least 3/4 of the promised benefit amounts to those. So you might see a cut in the amount of benefits that you might otherwise receive, but more than likely they're not going to go to zero. Okay? Eligibility. Let's talk about that. Eligibility. So you generally need 40 credits of working service, which is about 10 years, in order to become eligible for Social Security. And once you hit this, you get 100% of whatever your, and I hate to use the word entitlement, whatever your benefit amount is at your full retirement age. Your 100% of your PIA, your primary insurance amount, at your full retirement age. Well, what the fuck is full retirement age? Great question. Here we go. And hopefully you guys are taking notes on this. You may want to, because the idea behind today's show is, again, the highlights, the crash course, take some information down, and then take the time to go and research a lot of the stuff on your own as it relates to your own individual and specific situation. We can't possibly do that for every single situation, every single age, every single, everything on today's show. It's just meant to give you the highlights. So for full retirement age, it used to be, and for some folks that have been retired for quite some time, it still is age 65, right? But that has increased over time. So I'm going to go through some different birth years if you want to take some notes and figure out where you fall if you're not sure what your full retirement age is. Depending on the year that you were born will determine what your full retirement age is. So here we go. If you were born between the year 1943 and 1954, your full retirement age is age 66. That is the age at which you would get 100% of your primary insurance amount if you started collecting at that age. If you were born between 1955 through 1959, it's going to be 66 and then add 2 months for every year. So if you were born in 1955, it would be 66 and 2 months. 1956, it would be 66 and 4 months, and so on, all the way through 1959. If you were born in 1960 or later, your full retirement age under current law is age 67. And again, any of these could change. More than likely they will change for a whole host of reasons over time, but that's the way that it stands right now. Social Security is based on your highest 35 years of earnings. So if you have some higher earning years, presumably later on in your career, those higher earning years can actually replace some of the lower earning years when you maybe first got started into the workforce. Okay, so just because, let's say, it's based on your highest 35, if you worked for 40 years and the last 5 of those years were pretty stellar earnings years, then more than likely those 5, that last 5 years is going to replace probably the first 5 years where you maybe weren't earning quite as much. So it's only going to help you. It doesn't mean that you can't work more than 35 years. They just take the highest 35 years in terms of calculating your benefit. If you are going to collect your own benefit based on your own working record, here's a few things to keep in mind. You could, if you wanted to, and there's reasons, there's pros and cons and reasons to or not do any of these. That's why I said we can't give anybody advice. We can just go through some tidbits and allow you to make your own decision and consult with your own professionals. But you could collect Social Security retirement benefits as early as age 62 on your own record. And if you did that, depending on the year you were born, as we just talked about, and depending on what your full retirement age is, you could see as much as a 30% permanent reduction in your benefit amount. All right, and again, that percentage reduction is going to be based on your birth year and your full retirement age. So you could collect early. Maybe you had a health issue. Maybe you had a parent or a family member that had a health issue, and it kind of forced you into early retirement. And maybe you don't necessarily have, you basically need to collect some sort of income to make ends meet. And you got to do what you got to do sometimes. So maybe you might choose to collect at age 62 or any time before your full retirement age. You could do that, okay? You also could, you yourself, have some health-related issues. Maybe your own longevity is not very good. Your own health is not very good. And you don't really think you're going to live all that long. Maybe you choose to take it early at 62. Generally speaking, probably not the best idea for the vast majority of people, but unfortunately there are a lot of people that choose to do that, more than you would think. The next, and there's three kind of categories here. So collecting early as age 62 would be the first category. The second category would be collecting at your full retirement age. And as we said a few minutes ago, that's going to be between ages 65 and 67. At that point, you would receive 100% of your benefit amount. So there's no reduction. There's also no increase because you didn't quote unquote wait longer. We'll talk about that next. You would just get whatever 100% of your benefit amount is, and you're good to go if you decide to do that. That could be good for some people that don't want to take the reduction, but maybe again, for some of those same reasons, they want to or choose to retire a little bit earlier. Maybe they need it to make ends meet. They're tired of working. Maybe they don't have sufficient assets to sort of do what we like to call, and again, I know we're not talking about strategies for individuals, but one quote unquote strategy that exists out there, which I guess kind of leads into the next section, is what we like to call a bridge strategy, where you may use other investments, other assets, other retirement accounts to sustain you or help sustain you so that you do not need to immediately collect Social Security benefits when you retire, and therefore allow you to do what we'll kind of segue into in the third category here, which is delay collecting your Social Security retirement benefit. And you can do that all the way up until age 70. There's no economic benefit to waiting past age 70 to do so. And for every year that you choose to delay between your full retirement age and age 70, you get about an 8% increase in the monthly benefit amount that you're going to receive. So if you were, let's say your full retirement age was 66 and you delayed all the way out 4 years until 70 to start collecting your Social Security retirement benefit, you would get an 8% per year increase in the benefit amount. So 8% times 4 years is a 32% increase versus what you would have gotten previously. So if your monthly benefit amount was going to be, let's say, $1,000 a month at age 66, and that was your full retirement age, well, you might collect $1,320, $1,320 per month at age 70. And that is a permanent increase in the benefit. And oh, by the way, I don't think I put this in my notes, but while I'm on a roll here, Social Security retirement benefits are inflation adjusted. So those benefit amounts will go up generally over time to keep pace with inflation. And so the higher of a benefit amount that you can start with, getting an inflation adjustment on a higher amount is going to make that much easier for you. Think about it in the context of going to work. If you go to work and your starting salary is X, pick a number, I don't know, let's say it was $50,000, right? And you got a cost of living adjustment or a raise based on $50,000 versus the next person who goes to work and their starting salary is $100,000 and they get a cost of living adjustment or raise based on their initial $100,000. In percentage terms, it's going to be the same, but in dollar terms, the person that started at the higher salary amount, the higher $100,000 in this example amount, when they get those cost of living adjustments in dollars, it's going to be significantly more helpful and beneficial than if they're working on a base of 50,000. Similar concept here. The 50,000 would be analogous to collecting at full retirement age, and it's not quite double. I just used a hypothetical example of 100,000, but whatever. That, 32% increase on that, it would be, similar to that happening with delaying until 70. And just because I'm a fucking nerd, I'm going to go ahead here and do some quick math and take $50,000 times 1.32% and 66,000. So maybe that's a better example. So you can start, your starting salary, let's say, was 50,000 at work, and you get a cost of living adjustment on that, versus if your starting salary was $66,000 a year at work and you got a cost of living adjustment on that, you would rather get a cost of living adjustment on a higher base, on a higher amount. In this example, $66,000. Same thing with your Social Security benefits. You can take it at your full retirement age, and in a hypothetical example, let's say you got $1,000 a month, and you're going to get a cost of living adjustment on that. Or if you waited, let's say, until 70, and now your base is higher, it's $1,320 per month, you're going to get a cost of living on that $1,320 per month. That's the sort of example that I was trying to take full circle here. So hopefully you're still with me. All right. So the bridge strategy would be delaying until 70 and using other assets. And there's different ways and specific strategies and reasons to do that, and a whole bunch of stuff baked into that. But to allow your benefit to increase until 70 and use other assets to sustain you along the way. So that's one idea, not a recommendation, just an idea. So those three categories: collect as early as 62 and get as much as a 30% permanent reduction, collect at full retirement age and get a 100% of your benefit amount, or delay all the way up until age 70 with an 8% per year increase and start off with a much higher benefit amount. Those are three general categories of options that you would have to collect Social Security retirement benefits based on your own record. So normally I actually do a 1 hour long webinar on this, and it's in a visual format. I understand I'm just doing this on an audio mechanism here. So there's a lot of things that I actually took out, and some concepts that really may not resonate quite as well or make as much sense in strictly an audio format. So I had to kind of, I don't want to say dumb it down, but I had to kind of scale it down a little bit. But one of the things that we do on the webinar is a break-even analysis. So let's just say we had somebody that was 66 at full retirement age. And again, going back to my previous example, they were going to get $1,000 a month. All right. Again, not a recommendation, but one thing that sometimes people like to see is, what is a break-even analysis? When does it make sense to collect at these different ages based on how long I'm going to live? Well, you tell me how long you're going to live and I'll tell you what to do. And we all have a good laugh because nobody fucking knows how long you're going to live, right? But let's say in this example, somebody dies at 78 or earlier. Collecting early at age 62 would win. That would produce the highest cumulative amount of Social Security retirement benefits collected in that example. If that same person that has the same full retirement age of 66 and the same benefit amount of $1,000 a month dies between the ages of 78 and 82, then collecting at full retirement age, in this example, full retirement age of 66, would have been the most lucrative because it would have produced the highest cumulative benefit amount of Social Security retirement benefits collected. And then finally, if that person were going to die after the age of 82, then collecting at age 70 would win because that would produce the highest cumulative amount of Social Security retirement benefits, all else being equal. So there's a lot of considerations that go into the decision. You don't just say, well, I think I'm going to die at this age, so fuck it, I'm going to pick this one. That's not the entire analysis, but it is something to take into consideration as you're trying to figure out what this looks like in the context of what you're trying to do for your situation. All right, so far, we've talked about Social Security retirement benefits for you based on your work, based on your record, based on your age, right? Now we're going to transition a little bit twice. The first transition point, we're going to talk briefly about what's called spousal benefits. So if you're single, you can tune out for a few minutes here. If you're married, you'll probably want to listen up. Spousal benefits are also available. So you can, if you're married, claim the higher of your own benefit, if it's more, or up to 50% of your spouse's benefit, which is known as a spousal benefit. So you can take the higher of your own or up to half of your spouse's, okay? That's called the spousal benefit. It is similar to your own benefit in terms of the reduction goes your spousal benefit is going to be reduced by up to 35% if you take it prior to full retirement age. So just like there's a reduction on your own work record of your own benefit if you take it on yourself early, there's also a reduction if you take a spousal benefit and you're not full retirement age. And that reduction, as I just mentioned, can be as much as 35%. If you want to collect spousal benefits, you can only claim those spousal benefits after the primary file. So let's say you're the wife and you want to collect spousal benefits on your husband's record. You would not be able to do so until your husband actually files. Okay? There are some special rules for ex-spouses, for anybody that's divorced, and there's also some rules around remarriages. In the interest of time and the fact that this is a basic show, I've decided to skip over that, but just know there are some special rules if you've ever been divorced and or if you've gotten remarried. So you'll want to check that out. If we ever do, I don't know that we will, but if we do an advanced show, I may include some of that in the advanced show. In the meantime, if you have questions, feel free to email the show, realtalkpersonalfinance@gmail.com. We're going to transition again really quick now to survivor benefits. So we first talked about your own benefits. We just briefly talked about spousal benefits. Now we're going to talk about survivor benefits. So when a spouse passes away, the surviving spouse will receive the highest household benefit amount. That's the easiest way to think about it. If somebody dies, whoever's still living is going to get the highest amount that the household was receiving, regardless of whose benefit that actually was. Okay? So, again, not trying to get too much into strategy, but one thing to think about is if you are the primary income earner, generally speaking, you may want to consider delaying collecting your own benefit because that benefit could cover not just your lifetime, but also your spouse's lifetime. If you're married, it could actually cover 2 lifetimes if it's the higher benefit amount. And that's important. That's something a lot of people don't think about. If you are a surviving spouse, you will get a percentage of the deceased spouse's benefit amount. How does that work? Well, if you are, and there's, again, we don't want to go too far down. If somebody is disabled, there's some special rules where you could potentially get these benefits earlier. We're going to skip that for the interest of the basic show today. But assuming you're not disabled, you could collect survivor benefits between the ages of 60 and your own full retirement age. You would get anywhere from 71.5% all the way up to 99% of your deceased spouse's benefit amount. If you are full retirement age or older than that, when you go to collect these survivor benefits, you would get 100% of the deceased benefit amount. It is important to note that if the deceased spouse was getting reduced benefits, so if they collected early, remember way back we talked about if you collected on your own record early, if they did that and they were getting a reduction because of that, because they did it before their full retirement age, and now you're collecting survivor benefits because they died, if they were getting a reduced Social Security amount, then your survivor benefit is also going to be reduced, and that's important to know. Finally, if you are age 70, and again, there's a little bit of a strategy here I guess we can touch on, you have the ability, if it makes sense, to switch to your own Social Security benefit, which now would have benefited from delayed retirement credits if it's higher. So there is no, I should have started by saying on survivor benefits, there is no delayed retirement credits. Remember we talked about if you waited between full retirement age and age 70 on your own benefits, that you'd get a lift of about 8% per year. That does not apply to survivor benefits. So the best that you're going to do on survivor benefits is you're going to get 100% of whatever the amount was. Okay? If you collect early, a little bit of a reduction. You collect at full retirement age or beyond that, you're going to get 100%. Again, if they were getting a reduced benefit, when they were collecting, your survivor benefit is also going to be a reduced amount. However, one thing that some folks will do is they can collect a survivor benefit if their spouse passes away and not touch their own benefit on their own record and let their own benefit on their own record simply delay and earn those delayed retirement credits. Because remember, you do earn those on your own record. And then at 70, after they've gotten that 8% lift for up to, say, 4 years, for example, they can switch over and no longer collect the survivor benefit. They say, fuck that. I want my own benefit. now that I'm 70 and I want to get that increased amount because I delayed my own benefit. You are allowed to do that. Again, that's an idea. It's not a recommendation. You may want to run it by whomever you're working with to make sure that that makes sense in your situation, but you need to know that that is an option. Okay? Remarriage does not affect survivor benefits. Okay? Remarriage can affect, in the last section, spousal benefits. We're not going to cover that. But remarriage does not affect survivor benefits. However, if you are remarried and you're collecting a survivor benefit, but your new spouse is collecting on their own record, and the spousal benefit of the new spouse is higher, well, then you can switch over to that if you want to, right? So, you got some options there. You're not penalized for remarriage in the case of survivor benefits, whereas you might be on the spousal benefit side. And again, we'll leave that for another day. Next section here is Social Security taxation. We won't spend a lot of time on this, but it is important for you to know that it used to be what's called the provisional income formula. Now it's oftentimes referred to as the combined income formula. There is a formula that will determine, and we've alluded to this in previous shows on the Roth stuff, that determines how much, if any, of your Social Security benefits are going to be taxable. I'm not going to go into great detail here, but you need to know that that exists. And there's three main categories where potentially all of your Social Security retirement benefits could be tax-free, or it could be up to 50%, 50% is taxable, so up to half, or worst case scenario under current law, up to 85% of your Social Security retirement benefits could be taxable. There's different tiers depending on what used to be called provisional income. Now it's called combined income. Has to do with that. It also has to do with your tax filing status, whether you're single, married, filing jointly, etc. And that's something to talk about with your tax advisor. However, you do need to know, or will probably want to think back and remember, that qualified distributions, so if you play by the rules, from Roth type of plans, which we've talked about on previous episodes, do not count, at least currently, in this formula. So that's something to keep in mind as you're doing your planning in terms of how much, if any, of your Social Security retirement benefits are going to be taxable. If you are receiving, let's say, a pension, for example, or a spouse is receiving a pension, and it's a fairly healthy pension, there may not be too much that you can do in terms of getting out of these upper tiers, mid to upper tiers, in terms of how much is going to be taxable. However, if you're not going to be receiving a pension and you have a little bit of time between retirement and when you start collecting Social Security retirement benefits, and you are considering things like Roth conversions and partial Roth conversions, these are conversations that you want to have with your tax advisor, because if you plan things out correctly, it is very possible to potentially reduce the amount of your Social Security benefits that are going to be subject to taxation. In some cases, there's nothing you can do. Pensions are a big one. If you get a lot of pension income coming in, tough shit, you're probably not going to be able to get out of it. However, if you don't, and you have a little bit of wiggle room, and you have a little bit of time, and you have different accounts, and you structure your affairs in a certain way, it is possible to do some really good tax planning with your tax advisor, and this is definitely something that you want to be talking with them about. And if they don't know what the fuck you're talking about, get a new tax advisor. That's my quote-unquote advice. No, it's not advice. That would be my suggestion. Okay. Next is just other tidbits to know and or explore. So you can withdraw your application within 12 months of collecting Social Security, and there's different reasons to do that. If you applied and then you say, whoops, and you want to change your mind, you do have to pay everything back, and you can apply at a later date, but you do have a one-time option to withdraw your application within 12 months of starting to collect, so that's something to know. The next one is, the next two are going to be provisions that may or may not apply to you. If they do, you want to look them up. If they don't worry about it. The first one's called the Windfall Elimination Provision, or the WEP. And if you go to the Social Security Administration's website, which is ssa.gov, you'll be able to find all this stuff on there. They have specific PDFs that explain this in excruciating detail. However, this might apply if you worked in a job with a pension where you did not pay into Social Security through payroll taxes. So that could apply to you in potentially reducing your own benefits. Similar to that, but slightly different, is going to be what's called the Government Pension Offset, or the GPO. And that might apply to your spousal or survivorship benefits if you're getting a pension from a job where you didn't pay Social Security taxes. They could actually reduce the Social Security amount by about 2/3 of the pension amount. Normally, in the webinar, we do an example and we go through some numbers and all that. In a podcast format, it's just people are going to get lost, so I decided to take that out. We're not going to do that today. Just know that if you or a spouse have ever worked in a job where you're going to be getting or they're going to be getting a pension, and as a function of that, they did not pay into Social Security during the time that they were working in that job that's going to get that pension, you definitely want to look up these two items, the WEP for windfall elimination provision and the GPO for the government pension offset. Those are things that you're definitely going to want to be aware of and factor those into your planning, because the last thing you want to do is not know that these exist and assume you're going to get your full benefit amounts, and then come to the harsh realization that that may not be the case, and it could derail your whole plan or a chunk of it, depending on how much those reductions might be in your situation. So if somebody has a pension from employment that Social Security taxes were not paid, definitely look those up and check them out. Finally, you want to know about the earnings test that may apply if you choose to work, even if you're working part-time and you're collecting Social Security benefits prior to your full retirement age. Once you hit your full retirement age, the earnings test goes out the window, doesn't apply anymore. But there are some limits or some tiers or thresholds, whatever you want to call them, where if you earn more than a certain amount, then for every dollar above that amount, they will suspend a portion of your benefits to be collected later. And so in 2022, and you can look this up, but the lower tier is $19,560. So anything you earn above that, they're going to suspend $1 for every $2 over that threshold that you earn. And then on the higher tier, which is $51,960, they're going to suspend $1 for every $3 you earn over that $51,960. Everyone's situation is going to be different. I'm not going to say to never do this because, again, we don't give advice on the show. However, if you are going to be working and you are before your full retirement age that we went through at the beginning of the show, depending on how much you're going to be earning, you really might want to consider whether or not it actually makes sense for you to collect Social Security benefits. And in some cases it might, but generally speaking, I don't know that it's necessarily going to. So if you're going to work, that's cool, but you may not want to be collecting benefits at the same time. Or if you do, you want to make sure you're going to be within the threshold, or you want to make sure that before you start collecting, you're at least full retirement age so you don't have to worry about the earnings test in the first place. So just a few things to think about there. Again, feel free to do your own research on that. This is just hopefully a crash course and some cliff notes to get you started. Okay, we can do, as I mentioned earlier in the show, a Q&A if needed for Social Security retirement benefit related questions. If there's something that you'd like to ask, feel free to email the show. We'll see what we can do. We may or may not be able to answer it. It's just I don't want to get into the whole giving advice thing because we don't do that on the show. But if it's something that we can take a question and reframe it and have it be general in nature and answer it for the benefit of the audience, then we'll try to do that. You can submit those to realtalkpersonalfinance@gmail.com. Just put Social Security in the subject line and then feel free to ask your question. Also, Travel Queen is back from Greece. I actually talked to her earlier this month, so we are going to try to get her back on the show. We're going to have another travel hacking episode coming up here at some point in the future. Also, as I've alluded to in previous episodes on real estate investing, I may start a mini-series on different types of passive real estate investments, and so I think that is also going to be on the docket. And then finally, if you have any show ideas that you'd like to submit to the show, anything that you'd like to hear about on the show, again, please feel free to email us at realtalkpersonalfinance@gmail.com. Again, realtalkpersonalfinance@gmail.com. Okay, I think that's all I have for today's show, episode 21 on Social Security Retirement Benefits Basics. I hope you found it helpful. We will see you in the next episode.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.